Andrea Immer Robinson, and I'm a master sommelier. Exploring wine and food is my passion, and it's my life's work. As a wine and food book author, TV host, trained chef, and educator, it's my privilege to share with you the fun, people, and places, and the delicious pairings that make our lives and our planet a better place. Welcome to Quench from my home in wine country. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Quench, episode 3. So glad to have you all here on this festive holiday season. That's what we're all about tonight. But last show we did celebrate Thanksgiving, and I got my Lucy on, and we did some really fun stuff with pairing advice on Steal and Splurge and Sweet and Savory, and just had a really cool range of wines that give you a lot of choices for the Thanksgiving meal, but also just a lot of choices in general, because we're lovers of flavor and not always just the plain old, same old stuff, especially when we talk about all the fusion that we do with our cooking these days. We had fantastic guests, Ray Isle with his book, The World in a Wine Glass. If you haven't checked it out, it's fantastic. We also had David and Coral Brown of Brown Estate. And tonight's show, though, is called Holiday Spirit and Sparkle. And of course, spirit to me means cocktails and sparkle means bubbles. And those are both great, great ways to celebrate the holidays. So, of course, my guests for cocktails, I have to have Dale DeGroff, the master mixologist, really of all of them, and truly America's first master mixologist and a great mentor to everyone in the world of cocktails. And then to talk about bubbles, but also her new book, we have my fellow mom and som, Kelli White, who's the author of the new book, and we're going to talk all about it, but Wine Confident, There's No Wrong Way to Enjoy Wine, which if you haven't seen it, Eric Asimov, who knows a little thing or two about wine, wrote about it in the New York Times today as one of his best wine books of the year. So I totally agree, and I'm super excited to have her with us. But first of all, why cocktails? Well, because they're festive, and it's the festive season. And, you know, it's also the cool thing about cocktails is that they're easy, right? They're easy to make great. They're easy to control the ingredient quality and the proportions, especially versus RTDs. I know those are really popular, but there's a time and place for those, and I tend to think it's airplanes. And when you're at home, and especially when you're going to be celebrating the holidays, how about learning some cocktail making skills? So that's what we have Dale here for tonight. We're going to make some cocktails inspired by the holidays because it's the New York City Rockefeller Center tree lighting ceremony this evening, and Dale and I both got to work at Rockefeller Center at the top of the Rainbow Room. He more than I did. I was more at Windows on the World, but it was such a fun, great place to be. I remember serving all kinds of thousands and thousands of guests during the holidays, some fancy ones. We even had John Travolta on the dance floor at Rainbow Room one time. If you like NFL, we had Chris Collinsworth, who is one of the great announcers that never ages. But we also have with us, of course, as I said, Dale DeGroff, and that's right there at the Rainbow Room from the original Quench show way back in the day. And he's been teaching us all about cocktails. And he and I have been talking about and teaching cocktails for a really long time. This is us at Macy's, another holiday destination in New York City. So I want to just say, Dale, welcome to the show. And this is his book. It's not super new. The book's been around for about a year, right? But it's called The Craft of the Cocktail, and it's really the new craft of the cocktail, Dale, because it is completely updated with amazing history, stories, fantastic photography. So thank you for coming to the show. How are you?
I am so delighted to be hanging out with you again, Andrea. I have to tell you folks that when I would go to wine tastings with Andrea, she was a machine. She went from item to item to item with her notebook, and I stood there listening, tasting, and I'd go, yeah. I'd look over her shoulder, go, yeah. You never missed anything. You were just such an amazing partner, because I obviously got in between wine masters at the Rainbow Room, and that happened more than I had wished. I had to take those duties, and it was very difficult. but hanging out with you made it a lot easier.
Well, and you know and I learned so much about cocktails and spirits from you, and I have to say that as we get into tonight's festive cocktails, when you and I talked earlier in the week and did a little rehearsal, I found out that I've gotten rusty, and there's a lot of catching up I need to do because apparently I don't know the right gear to stir a stirred cocktail with. So you're gonna talk me through this. I'm gonna make a Windows on the World inspired Manhattan. We called it the 107 Manhattan because we swapped out the vermouth that you typically use. We used a high quality wine, in this case Madeira. And so I'm going to use this Cosart Gordon Madeira because it is a world-class fortified wine. And so instead of using vermouth, which is usually based on lower quality wines, this is a spectacular one and gives so much flavor on its own. It's one of the oldest Madeira house, founded in 1745. It was a hugely popular wine. I think the wine that they toasted the signing of the Declaration of Independence with. So I know to start for my Manhattan, I should be adding ice to my mixing glass, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and
look
now
at the beautiful beaker you have. We didn't have
I
those
love
back
it,
in the
right?
day.
So this just start
Look at
making your
this.
Christmas list now of all the gear that you need for cocktail season. And then New York whiskey. Like when I did it at Windows on the World, it was a 107 proof because we were on the 107th floor bourbon. But in this case, I wanted to make it really New Yorky. So tell me about the Jaywalk whiskey and which one should I use? I have bonded and I have straight rye. I should
Bonded,
use the
of
rye,
course.
right?
American whiskey is at its sweet spot at bonded 100 proof.
Oh,
Absolutely.
bonded. Okay, let me do bonded.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the sweet spot for American whiskey, in my
Okay,
opinion. But
okay.
if you want to use the other one, go for it.
Well,
think
I want to use the right one, and what I realized too is I'm going to ask my my kitchen roadies. I forgot to get my big fancy ice cubes, so never mind. I'm just going to use my regular ones. But this is the kind of glass that you can use one of those big fancy ice cubes in if you want to. I'm going to make two versions though, so I want to make one on. You've got. Look at you. You got the big cube. That's great. I'm going to make a stirred, and I'm going to use this little glass. Tell me about this glass.
That's called the Nick and Nora. And
Okay.
I don't know if you know this story about the Nick and Nora. Do you know it?
I don't think so.
When we opened the Rainbow Room, we wanted dishes with tradition and drinks with tradition. And I said, Joe, we can't use these big V-shaped steakhouse martinis. We need a glass with tradition. He said, go over to Minner's Designs, and they got some old catalogs over there. And I found that glass under the name Little Martini. And I said to them when I walked in, remember the Thin Man movies? The glass that Nick and Nora were using in the Thin Man movies.
Yep.
So I would always order it as a Nick and Nora when I set the order 6 cases of Nick and Nora's. Steelite bought their catalog and they renamed it Nick and Nora. Isn't that sweet?
And now, which is great, and now that is sort of like the glass, like everybody's using these days, which I love because I think you keep it's a smaller cocktail, so it's a nice serving size, but it also stays cold when you want it to be cold. So we're going to do Manhattan, and that means we're going to do. So I need to do enough to make a nice rocks version and also a nice Nick and Nora version. So how much whiskey should I use?
Well, I'm going to say use 3 ounces of whiskey, 1.5 ounces for each drink.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's 1.5 ounces in the top there. I hope so. We'll get close enough. And then I like this to be not too sweet because I want to use your Amaro, which we're going to talk about more in a second. And I feel like it has a beautiful spice character that I don't want to overpower. So for the wine, though, in place of the vermouth, how much?
Do half of what you just did.
Okay, half of what I just did. So I'll do that.
1.5 ounces.
There we go. Okay, I got it. 1.5 ounces. Okay, and then De Graaf Amaro. Tell me about this. Got to go back to that.
It's based on allspice. That's why we call it New World Amaro, because allspice is a New World botanical. The master distiller, chemist Ted Breaux, famous for absinthe.
Fantastic.
And I started working. Well, this was based on allspice, my bitters here. And so we always knew that someday we'd want to make some money and sell something in ounces. Hello. And so we started working on yeah.
Indeed. So maybe like 1 ounce of this?
I'm going to say start at 1/2 ounce
Half,
because
okay.
well, you've tasted it. It is super. Oh,
I
you're
love
making
it.
two. Yeah, do an ounce. No, you're making
Yeah,
two. Do an ounce.
it's Christmas in a bottle. I think when I smelled it, I was like, that is a gingerbread cookie or a snickerdoodle. I mean, it's so delicious and so fragrant. Okay, so now I'm embarrassed to say that I thought I was hot stuff with the bent Just So bar spoon, but you have corrected me that the newest and grooviest thing is this teardrop ended bar spoon. So do I have the right thing?
You sure do. Now you want to
Okay.
put the bowl of the spoon against the side and the inside of the glass.
Against the
Go
side.
right to the
Okay.
bottom.
Okay.
And at
And
the
then, oh,
bottom,
you're right.
just turn. See how beautifully designed this spoon is? Even a
This
person who
is,
doesn't know how to do this can do it instantly. Because the
yeah,
spoon is a
so
good.
teardrop spoon, and it really is super easy. We used to do all manner of like fighting with this plasticky thing, so this is great. Okay, so I've got a couple of willing tasters here that will check me on the Nick and Nora, but first. And I know I should be more snobby about cherries, but I decided like I'm just gonna do the regular old Luxardo cherries. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. And
I
then
found
I
I found a
decided,
beautiful cherry from your area up there, not
oh,
north of you, called Bordeaux Royal Harvest cherries.
oh, wow. All right.
They're
Bordeaux
good.
Royal
They're good.
Harvest Cherries is a fun one to look for then. And then I decided for a garnish, since we're doing holiday, I've got a star anise, so it's like my little tree topper. Just throw
Oh,
that in
that's
there,
nice.
just for
That's
fun.
sweet.
And, you know, this is maybe, I don't know, the trunk of the tree. I don't know. I'm just sticking
Yeah.
it in there. Okay. So I'm going to enjoy a taste of this. Ooh, and then, oh my
I'll
gosh.
toast you with a little Amaro.
I'm going to be a little, thank you, cheers. I'm going to be a little bit charming by the time this show is over, right? Ooh, I don't know which one I like better. Okay, so now let's talk about your cocktail, because
Okay.
we are working with sparkling wine, and I've got a Prosecco, because I think you're going to help us make a really cool Prosecco-based cocktail, correct?
Yeah. I see we have great minds think alike here.
Oh,
Right?
look at you, Mio Netto Brut. To me, it's one of the great ones, and it's
Of course I do.
easy to find, but the quality is just quite delicious. And so,
Smart,
and it's
smart.
Brut. It's not this sweet style that a lot of people are maybe, expecting with the typical Prosecco. Okay, so what do we do? What are you making?
Okay, we're going to make something called the Negroni Spaiato Corretto.
Okay.
So the Negroni Spaiato was created in Bar Basso in Milano. And the lore is that the father-son team, the son saw the father grab the bitter aperitivo and pour it into the glass. And
Oh
then he
wait, do
saw
I do
him.
that? Okay.
Yeah, that's the bitter
Okay.
aperitivo.
Okay,
This
I can
would
do
be
that.
Campari, but we're using my
just
bitter
add it.
aperitivo.
Oh, here we go.
And then of course he grabbed the vermouth like he was supposed to do, equal parts, one. And then he grabbed the sparkling wine, and before the son could get over there and grab the bottle, he said, "Dad, it's not a spritz. It's a Negroni, Dad." And so it was too late. The spritz went in there.
Oh,
So
right.
the son took the gin. I happen to have Hendrick's Orbium, which is their new bottling, and he rushed over and he took the gin and did an equal part of gin in there. So what he did is he corrected.
Exactly right, because so
The
if
Spaiato,
you're
the
Italian,
mistake.
if you mess up in Italian, you say "è sbagliato." I messed up, and so
Yes.
if you corretto, you corrected the mess up. So okay, I got it. So I got my ice in there. I have Amaro. I have a little bit of. I didn't use vermouth, as you saw, and then do I just fill her up?
Yeah, well, go 3 ounces is plenty with the sparkling, and then I have this cute little spoon. Look at this cute little spoon here. Talk about
Ooh.
great cocktail tools. This is a little 19th century cocktail spoon that he's used both back.
Wow. All right. I just have a regular old, 20th century.
Cool, that's right. Now I'm using a slice. I like to use kata kata oranges, but they're not in season because they have such
Okay.
a beautiful, stunning pink flesh. So I slide it in. I'd like to try to get it in so that you see it through the edge of the glass. Like
Wow, that's
that.
so
Isn't that
beautiful.
great?
That is so
Yeah.
beautiful. I had to look over at my screen where I can see what you've got in front of you. I didn't put a garnish in there, but I think it's going to taste great. So
That's
let's give it a
okay.
go.
To the Negroni Spaiato Corretto.
Wow. I love it. That is fantastic. And it's kind of a lightened up version too. So, if you like the Negroni profile, actually really love that with your Amaro because it's a lot more sort of woodsy and complex and kind of bass noted and very, very exciting. So, so this is just fantastic. Is the recipe in the book?
No, because the products came out post publication, but the Negroni is in the book.
Yeah.
You'll find that, and you might even find a
Yes.
couple variations on it, like the Boulevardier in there. You know the
Excellent.
variation of Boulevardier,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
And the old
absolutely.
Val, another variation on the Negroni. Now that the Negroni is Negroni Week, Negroni this, Negroni that, I think the
Yeah.
Campari Company really, well, they wanted to take over Cocktail Hour with two drinks, the Spritz and the Negroni, and I think they pretty much. Uh, I was going to say, I don't know if I could swear on this show, but what I would usually say is they kicked ass. They did it.
You're allowed to say that. I don't think that
They
counts
took
as
over the
swearing.
American Cocktail Hour, and it was
Indeed.
a long haul, but they did it.
Very much so. Well, Dale, this is fantastic. I just do want to say for people who are studying for your sommelier tests and things like that, I know that I would not have passed the Master Sommelier test without the chance to work with Dale and learn from him. So this is a great thing to be able to, this show's a great one to be able to participate in, but also, and if you want to see more cocktail shows, let me know because we can write our ticket as to what we want to talk about. But this is a great opportunity. That book is a great way to explore and learn the classics, but also the techniques. And I think you can see it's easy, right? Even in this case, Dale, sliced a piece of citrus, you don't need great knife skills to make great cocktails. Whereas if you want to slice an onion the right way, it's a little bit hard. So you need the finesse, you need the knowledge, but this is something that all of us can do that's super hands-on and a lot of fun. We used to do that with classes with people and everybody just loved it so much. So Dale, I am so thrilled to have been able to spend some time with you. Please say hey to Jill and all the family. And I know that you have food that I don't have, which is that you're going to enjoy your cocktail with.
I'm going to take my little Reggiano Parmigiano knife and attack this little chunk of cheese and
Yeah.
have some sausage. But have a happy holiday, please.
You too. Thank you so
And-
much. Much love to you.
Yeah.
Hope to see you in person soon. Cheers. And now I'm going to welcome my next guest. Let's get her right over here to the stage. Kelli White.
Hi.
How are you? And Kelli, as I told you, is the author of Wine Confident. But first of all, happy holidays.
You too.
And we live in the same town, but we're both moms, and so we pretty much only ever work and mom, and so we never see each other. So it's great
That's
to have
true.
you here.
Thank you.
So congratulations, first of all. It is a spectacular book, and I want to tell people that when you write a book for, I'll say this is for the masses. I think it's a really good introductory book, but it's not a for dummies type book, which is a great one as well. What I mean by that is that it's for smart people who don't have a lot of time to spend learning about wine, because she has learned everything that you don't need to know to figure out what you do need to know to put it in the book, right? And that's really the secret of a great wine book. What was the thinking? What was the inspiration for it?
I like that. First of all, I like the idea of wine for smarties. I should have that could have been that would have been a better title. I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, the thinking here was just thinking back to my own journey in wine and the things that I learned that I had to unlearn. I think sometimes we can really chase the wrong dreams in wine a little bit. And part of what I love about wine is its complexity and all the ritual and, all the history and all of that. But a lot of that stuff can also be pretty outdated. And so I try to trim the fat wherever I could and be like, these are some of the traditions and the skills and techniques and sort of, points that I think are really worth paying attention to. And then these other ones can go. And so, things like sniffing the cork, looking at legs, it's like, okay, let's just forget all that.
Right.
And focus on the things you actually really need to know to navigate the wine industry intelligently and with a lot of purpose.
Well, the thing that I thought was really cool too is, I felt like we were sort of kindred spirits. You talk about Madeira in it.
Yeah.
Which is, and we already talked about this with the cocktail, it really is a historic wine and a historically American favorite wine. Obviously, you're a fan.
I love Madeira, and I love the history of Madeira. And it's something that that I go back to again and again and again. And I love how initially challenging the flavors are, but so rewarding.
Yeah.
That kind of, for me, I've come to learn in my life of wine that a lot of the alcoholic beverages that I love the most are delicious, but they're also like a little bit not delicious. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're not just,
Kind
we're
of
not
like,
just
like funky cheese.
Exactly.
You're like, do I want that in my mouth? Yes, I do.
We're not just
Really a
drinking
lot.
fruit and flowers.
Yeah.
There's stuff like, gym socks and Parmesan rind, and Madeira is one of those, where it's like, if you made it in a smoothie, would I enjoy that? No. But yet it works in the wine.
Yeah.
And Madeira is one of those wines to me that is really challenging and intellectually super interesting in the flavors.
It's the Italians would say, and I know it's Portuguese, would say vino da meditazione. I'm
Yep.
sure there's a Portuguese phrase, but it's a perfect one, I think, also for the holidays because it's kind of indestructible. So if you open it and you want to drink a splash, right, that bottle is not going to go bad really quickly, which is a great thing because I think people worry about that a lot with wine.
Right, as they should.
Yeah.
As they should.
Yeah. And so for me, the thing that about this book that was just so fantastic, I shouldn't have skipped ahead yet, was is that it really helps cut through, like you said, cut through the fat, but also it's exciting and excited and festive, and that's why it's a great way for us to jump in tonight and help people a little bit with quality sparkling wine. And I say that term with deliberateness because and don't pay attention to the fact that this sommelier has spotty wine glasses, but
I took my glasses off, so I have no idea
God
what's
bless
happening.
you. God bless you. Or that I grabbed it by the rim because that's really bad too. Anyway, I think I might have to turn in the sommelier card. But the idea of these sparkling wines of quality is that they aren't your typical thing that you're going to maybe find in a can, which will have carbonation added to it. So we're going to be talking about two of the main methods for quality sparkling wine production by exploring some delicious Proseccos. We already had the Mionetto Brut, which you saw used in the cocktail. It's a great cocktail wine, but also a wonderful wine to sip on its own. And then we will, of course, go with the other method of production and explore champagne, because this is the time of year for festivity. For me, champagne is it Monday?
Year round.
Yeah, exactly. And but at the same time, if you haven't dived into the category of champagne, this is really the right time, don't you think?
Exactly.
And so when you're, what do you think about champagne as a value? I feel like it represents a really good value these days. Even though it's a splurge, it's relative to luxury wines, it delivers a lot, don't you think?
I do, and that's one of the things that I tell people when I'm teaching about champagne and talking about the traditional method and how labor intensive it is, and honestly quite baroque and insane and impractical and romantic and all of these things we like about wine, is that it's such a technical product, and that is written into law. Mm-hmm. And so even if you feel like a $50 bottle of champagne is a splurge, that's kind of the low tier of champagne. Mm-hmm. But there's almost this quality guarantee that technique is so enforced, right? So I think there's just a baseline of quality. You could go into wine stores and just randomly grab a lot of $50 bottles of wine, and they're not all going to be good. But I would say with champagne, I'm very rarely unhappy.
Yeah.
There are some I like better than others.
Right.
But I've
It's a
had very
style thing.
few bad
Right.
champagnes.
Right. It's almost like at that point, it's almost like picking a designer or a car brand or whatever that you like, because it's there's a minimum standard, and it's a really, really the wine gets fermented on the lees or the yeast cells, and that gives you a distinctive taste profile that you don't get with a wine that's just done by adding carbonation. Fair to say?
Right. So like something you stick in your soda stream. That's going
Right.
to taste different.
Exactly. Yes. No comparison. So tank method, basically, it's a second fermentation that gives carbonation, but you're in a big tank. And traditional method, you also have a second fermentation giving carbonation, but
It's in the bottle.
Okay.
And it generally lasts a lot longer.
right. And so I wanted to kind of just show people what that looks like. Actually, we'll get to that no, I'll go ahead and jump ahead. This is an interesting, we'll go back to Prosecco in a second, because I want people to see when we're talking about the second fermentation in the bottle, this is what we mean. You see on your screen, there's a bottle there that has the yeast cells in the neck of the bottle. And this, I took a picture of this at a winery. This is actually in Italy, because they make traditional method there in many regions, including, this was Franciacorta, which is definitely a cool one to check out, especially if you're doing your 7 fishes, Christmas Eve thing. Don't invite the bear's mom. If anybody saw that show, that was the craziest episode ever. Has anybody seen The Bear, 7 Fishes?
Oh, God.
Oh, good gosh, right?
No,
My.
I got rid of that through, I think, electroshock therapy, but yeah.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, so so when you have that wine in the bottle, you're getting more time on the lees, and you're getting more lees contact. This is an image showing how they can. They're distributing the lees initially, and then eventually they shake the bottle, and they're able to actually get the lees all the way to the neck, and then you can take it out. But all of that extra time on the yeast is giving a whole different taste profile versus the shorter time in the tank, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at them. And we're first of all going to spill the jaywalk rye. It's live TV, folks, and then we are also going to, though, before we get too much further with champagne and sparkling wine, is we're going to talk about the most important aspect of it, which is opening the bottle safely.
Yeah, this is something I talk a lot about when I'm teaching about wine, because generally speaking, wine is a kind of a low-risk proposition, but this is one of the few times you can actually hurt yourself.
Yes.
There's more pressure in these bottles than there is in your car tire, and as someone who has shot myself in the neck with a champagne cork, I can tell you that it really hurts, and you can really do some damage.
And I've seen like a whole a whole chandelier taken out in like a ballroom. So the first thing we do, and you've got this is not the how to get your white laundry white show, so don't pay attention to that either. But we're gonna do our best to show you how to properly open the bottle, and you can talk about some of your tried and trues. The first thing I always say is make sure it's dry so you don't slip.
That's good.
Your grip, right?
Yep.
So whether you pull it out of the ice and it's wet, or it's been sitting there and gets condensation, that's a good starting point. And then we have, what's next? We just going to remove the foil.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you passed your exam, which, I never got that far, a lot of people use their wine keys, but for me, the charm of opening champagne and sparkling is that you don't need any gear.
Yes.
Right? You can just take it to a picnic and use your hands.
Yes, because you've got that nice little serrated little pull tab thing.
Exactly.
On the
which
foil.
Doesn't always work great like this one, but nonetheless.
Yeah, they're put through a process, and sometimes it works well, and sometimes not so much. And then we've got the muzzle or the cage, right? You see that thing. That's serving a purpose. It is holding the cork in. And so you really need to make sure that once you start to loosen it, you are forever at that point holding on to the cork for dear life, right?
Yeah, and this is the big mistake that everyone makes, even sommeliers, is that you never take the cage off the cork until it's all safely done and out of the bottle. Because this bottle is under pressure again, so this cork will take itself out.
Yes.
It will open itself.
Yes.
So you need to apply active pressure and keep that cage on until everything's done.
And holding. So it's usually like about 6 twists by tradition. Kevin Zraeli told me that, so I believe it. And I usually count just to see, but this time I didn't. The next rule is, and now that it's loose, consider it to be on the loose. And so don't let go of your grip, right? Then you point it away from people, hopefully not towards the teleprompter, because if that would shatter. And then you start to, I like to hold it also you're doing the same thing, on an angle that gives you a little bit more surface area at the top so the carbonation can escape a bigger surface area more slowly and carefully. And then you're just turning the bottle one direction and the cork the other, or holding the cork stationary and basically starting to feel the pressure. Don't yield to it. You are easing the cork out, not pulling it out unless you're at the World Series and you won, right? And then we're looking for just like a hiss or a cough or a sigh. And
we did it.
we should do this for a living. So I've got the Rosé Sauvage. I'm going to pour some of that for you. We'll get the Prosecco going here in a second too. And then you've got the Brut, and champagne can be corked. We're going to hope these aren't, and because we don't have a backup. And but I'm also going to open this Prosecco, and let's just bump through these things real quick. This is not the Prosecco show. It could be its whole own show. There are so many levels. It's not the champagne show. Same thing. That could be a week or a month of champagne shows, in my view, because I love it so much. But when you're talking about Prosecco, this is cool because this is a region just, I think it's like a 40-minute drive outside of Venice. So if you have a vacation planned to that amazing city, visit Valdobbiadene, Conegliano, that region. The Prosecco region is much bigger. And when you think about the classifications, the region has different smaller and smaller designations. And I always think of it as a regional name, at least in this case, is something like it's a neighborhood, but then it's like there are different homeowners associations or HOAs in the neighborhood. And the fancy part of the neighborhood probably has stricter rules and standards than maybe the less fancy part. So when we come to things like Prosecco, we have basic Prosecco DOC, so that's your everyday kind of neighborhood wine, and it's also your everyday wine, which is great. And then you bump up to Valdobbiadene, Conegliano Superiore, and then this one that we're going to try is a subsection of that called Cartizze, and it's this beautiful 264-acre hilly village. Everything has to be done by hand because of the slopes, and it's a really distinctive, special style that is completely different from these champagnes, partly because of the grape variety, but also because of the tank method. And in this case with the Cartizze, they actually leave a little bit of sugar in the wine. So it's made in what we call a dry style, which makes me crazy. Because when we say dry and extra dry in the champagne and sparkling wine realm, we do not mean dry as in no sweetness. It's the opposite. What do you think about that? How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think wine really gets in its own way. So a lot of times.
Exactly.
This is a perfect example.
Exactly.
Can we also talk about the fact that dry does not mean the opposite of wet? If we're talking in wine, it means the opposite of sweet.
Explain. Yeah. So, and should people be snobby about sweet?
No. Some of the best wines are sweet. And actually, one of my favorite articles I ever wrote was on how and why wines age well. And I interviewed people from all, leaders in the industry, all walks of life, and many of them said that sweeter champagnes will age better than drier champagnes.
Wow.
Specifically, the zero dosage ones are not necessarily meant for the long term.
Interesting.
So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, but it's true. I'm glad you pointed that out, because truly many of the world-class wines generally are some sweet wines, dessert wines from all over the world, like for example the Madeiras that we tried. Their range of sweetness there. But so let's start tasting it. So this is the Mionetto Cartizze. You can see it's a beautiful kind of celebratory bottle. What I like about it is that it's still got that real pretty purity, kind of a floral profile that's really, really nice. And the leesiness or yeastiness here, which back to that idea that the wine is in contact with the yeast, is just for a short amount of time. So it almost more reminds me of like a buttermilky, it's very light leesy character. Or if you're a bread baker, you might recognize a little bit of that sort of sourdough sponge.
Buttermilk is the perfect word. It's very background. And it's letting the sort of natural fruitiness and the floral character of the grape to come through.
Yeah.
So it's not distracting.
Yeah.
It's complementary.
Yeah, and it's so just refreshing and light, and it's so interesting because even though this is more than 17 grams of sugar, I don't think it's too much more than 17 because it does not taste very sweet to me at all.
It's got a dry finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of the sweetness,
Yeah.
but it's not, it doesn't finish sweet. It doesn't feel like a dessert wine.
So to me, I think this would be a great one, frankly, for for a meal, but maybe a part of the meal that has some heat to it. Because when I think of a little bit of sweetness in wine, to me, sweet tames heat. If you think about coconut milk in a fiery curry, it tones down the Thai chili peppers. If you think about a margarita with jalapenos and Mexican food, sweet can tend to tone down heat, so it's a really nice thing. And then also these are pretty light in alcohol, which is a nice thing too for matching with spicy foods that have a chili pepper kick to them, because higher alcohol wines can tend to kind of fan the flames on your tongue, and some people love that. Some people love to sweat and be in lots of pain when they're eating meat. Are you
I am one of those people. It makes me feel alive. I like really spicy food.
Gotcha. She likes the Hazel Atlas says the bubbles look amazing. Oh, and B Justice says sabrage, sabering. Talk about this. You put that in the book, and I was like, ooh, don't try this at home.
Well, so I got a little salty at a couple of points in the book, and talking about sabering was one of them, because I am just not a fan, and I make fun of myself in the book and say that's because I'm very clumsy and I'm very uncool, but I'm also very smart. And I have seen, being in the industry as long as we have, sabering happens. It's somehow normally never the first thing you do, but sort of the thing you get the idea to do after you've already been drinking wine. So it's that's not a great situation. And I've just seen some really gnarly wounds. And so my whole kind of position is don't do it, which I know is not very fun. But nonetheless, what can I say? I already said I wasn't any fun. So.
No, you're totally fine. So I just want to give a pairing suggestion, because speaking of maybe something for Christmas Eve, 7 fishes, because these are crushed wasabi peas on top of a little bit of smoked salmon. I'm going to let you taste that later.
Cool.
But it's a delicious little kick of heat, and then you've got the nice acid that'll cut through the salmon. So if you like to do that tradition and you don't want to go all Italian dishes, it's a fun way to go. So delicious wine though, right?
Yeah.
And before we totally leave it, just let's compare it on the nose to the champagne, because I think this is a great thing to do with your friends, is get together and grab a Prosecco, grab a classic champagne or other bottle fermented wine and of high quality, and just when you smell them yourself, you are going to notice it. You will notice the difference. Yeah. Absolutely. How do you describe it?
Well, and this is one of the things that I say in the book, and that sometimes in the wine industry we give really fancy or romantic names to unromantic things. And so oftentimes when you're smelling a traditional method sparkling wine, the words you might come up with that you've heard other wine people say are things like brioche or toast or French bakery, when really what you're sort of getting at is that you're smelling the yeast, right? And yeast is not a particularly romantic word. We don't love to talk about it, but that's what you're smelling, these decaying cells that as they are sort of, macerating in the bottle for a long time are giving not just aromatic notes like these bread-like aromas or these baking smells, but also changing subtly the texture of the wine, which I think is really cool. But anyway, going back to our romantic words, this has a lot of bakery smells, and this is a hallmark of this method. You're smelling this method in the wine,
and I think that it still smells like wine, but it also, think about all the other things that you love that are fermented. They have just something else to them, right? Great quality chocolate, great espresso, great beer, great bread. It has a finish and it has depth and layers, and that's really what comes from this extended lees time. And then I think also texturally, the bottle fermentation really integrates the bubble really, really well. And why do you think that is? Do you have a feel for why you think that is? Just time?
Well, I had been told at some point that when the yeast cells are sort of degrading, they are releasing like nanoproteins and various kind of molecular compounds into the wine that not only change the texture of the wine but change the size of the bubbles because they're changing basically the sort of density of. But then there's another great wine book that just came out by Gus Zhu, who's the first Chinese master of
Gus
wine.
is fantastic.
And he said that research is still very much TBD.
Okay.
So just
He's a science
fact-checking
geek,
myself.
so,
He's a scientist, so he would know. So
Yeah.
fact-checking live as we go.
Yeah.
But that had always been what I had been told. But he said it's not necessarily in concrete.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's another thing that I don't know if this is true, but when I compare French champagne, and that's what this is Piper Heidsieck, their Brut, and then we also are going to taste their Rosé Sauvage, which is one of my favorite rosés. When it's true champagne, it's from the region. So let's take a look at that real quick. This is another way to travel because it is about a 40-minute TGV from Charles de Gaulle. So my personal approach to Paris is you go straight to Champagne from the airport, and then you take a chill train from Reims or Reims or Reims, ever how you want to say it, or Epernay rather, in the Champagne region back to Paris, and it's so much more civilized than trying to get from Charles de Gaulle into Paris. So that's a really, really fun way to do it, and you can stumble off the train and run into a classic champagne house, but it's really worth planning ahead to do that. For me, what's interesting about the Champagne region, aside from the fact, and we already took a look at those images of the bottle fermentation piece, is that it is this unique soil. And chalky from the time that region was an inland sea. So between 100 and 200 million years ago, that soil got put down in the form of little ocean critters, right, that turned into chalk.
Right. And today you can go and visit certain caves that are carved out of effectively stark white powdery walls, and it's just the most transportive, Star Wars-esque, just kind of insane situation that you can imagine. Yeah, it just doesn't feel terrestrial.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I don't know, I've never heard people talk about this, but I also think that maybe those conditions also affect the bubble integration and the fineness because they're aging the bottles down in those subterranean caves. And I know Gus would agree with this part. Cooler temperatures help gas, in this case carbon dioxide, to disperse and stay retained in the wine. So if they're aging for a really long time in really cool conditions, naturally cool, maybe that's affecting it too.
And that's also a good reminder to make sure your champagne is very cold before you open it.
Yes.
Because at hotter temperatures, that gas is much more active and wants to come out.
Well said. Don't you make sure it's well chilled, which means buy it out of the cold case because as soon as you get home, you're going to want to open it, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the styles, right? We just tasted a non-vintage, and what that means is it's a blend of vintages. I mean, champagne is fundamentally, in most cases, a blended wine, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, a lot of blending going on. Grapes, it's one of the few mainstream wines that blend white and red grapes together, which is already pretty radical. Vintages, a blend of different vintages, which is extremely radical in the context of contemporary wine. And then lots of vineyard blending, village blending, etc. So it's very much a wine of blending, and that has to do a lot with the climate, which is historically really marginal.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've been told that some wines, even wines like this one, which is for Piper Heidsieck, the house that we're tasting, they're kind of entry level. And it's called Brut. We'll talk about that in a second. That's the designation that refers to the level of residual sugar in it, which isn't much. And we already talked about the extra dry and so on. But that's the most common sort of signature of the house foot forward for a lot of the wineries. That's a really great place to start. And for most people, you don't need to trade up. But you may want to sometimes stylistically. So with Champagne, and it's all one region. Like we talked about Prosecco, and there are different areas. Champagne also has different higher designations. But generally speaking, unless you see those on the label, they're probably going to be blended with a lot of their neighboring partners to make a whole. So I have described it, and tell me if you agree with this, as it's like a impressionist painting,
okay,
right? Because they take all these blending components and make this whole. that's its own thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if you can picture Claude Monet up there with all these different little dabs of paint and then step back and, oh, it's a water lily, right?
Right.
Like, so just that sort of blending
I like it.
all kinds of discrete little bits. Because when I've tasted some of those wines that they start with, I have no idea how they would turn that into what they turn it into.
Yeah, it's a special alchemy.
Yeah. So, so that's what makes another thing that adds to the complexity. Let's talk about rosé for a second, though. And part of my goal here is for your homework assignment. Maybe this will be your New Year's Eve dinner or your New Year's Day brunch. Is you're going to do a fully sparkling wine menu. And many years ago, I used to do this with my wine cellar staff at Windows on the World, and everyone loved it. We lived for those days because we never got to celebrate the holidays until like 6 weeks after when inventory was done and we were recovered. The reason that you need to be checking out rosé is it's a great wine for meat, rack of pork, duck, things like that. Fantastic. Oh my gosh! And this truly does just smell like red wine.
Yeah, that's very nice.
And the color. Talk about the color, because this is a little bit darker than the typical rosé.
So I don't know this wine. You have to tell me. But another way in which champagne is a little bit strange is it's one of the few places in the world that creates rosé by adding still red wine to effectively the clear base. Is that what's happening here?
I think in this case, I think they do some of both. I think they
Okay.
both add still red, and I think they also give some skin contact and put that sort of straight into a Van Clair situation.
Okay.
That's part of the blend and part of the second fermentation, and so on. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's not the typical depth of color, but I think it's giving it a lot more muscle.
Yeah.
And a lot more red wine profile, but still with that white wine refreshment and that fantastic acidity that we love champagne for. So, so we talked about non-vintage, a blend. That's the typical. I also put on your chart there MV because some wineries call it multi-vintage. Same thing.
More
Just-
accurate.
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah, that's true. Very well said. Yeah, because you're blending from multiple years, and then the rosé style, like we discussed. So that's giving you some color either from the added still red or from some skin contact, or maybe a combination. And then Blanc de Blanc. What do you think?
That's my jam.
It's your jam. Glad I asked you.
Yeah, so Blanc de Blanc, you'll see terminology on champagne labels, Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir. Blanc de Blanc, white from white in French, just means that it's made entirely, most likely, from the Chardonnay grape. Blanc de Noir might mean that it's made from entirely Pinot Meunier and or Pinot Noir. There are there's a handful of other minor grapes, but those three are the main guys, right? And so Blanc de Blanc champagne tends to be just a little nervier, a little sort of more focused, a little fresher, a little brighter, more acidic. The Blanc de Noir styles tend to be a little richer, a little more base, less treble, but very, very different in terms of food pairings if you're doing that all sparkling dinner thing.
So we now know what Megan Trainor likes. She likes the base, no treble. So the treble stays with you. She gets the rosé sauvage, and okay, that's what we're here for, is to give wine recommendations to the stars, like you guys. So Blanc de Blanc, it's an important category to mention because I think we brushed over it. 3 major grapes in Champagne, 2 of which are red, right?
Right.
So give me a rundown.
Chardonnay. Everybody knows Chardonnay. Interestingly, though, most other places in the world, Chardonnay has a reputation for making sort of rich wines. In Champagne, it makes the nervier wines. And then the 2 main red grapes are Pinot Noir, which again, everybody knows, elegant, very fragrant red. Same is true for the Champagnes. And then Pinot Meunier, which you don't really see outside of Champagne. I mean, you can in some places, but it's very esoteric.
Yeah.
And that generally makes like just a fruitier style of wine. For a long time, it was considered kind of less than. But great Pinot Meuniers are having a renaissance right now, and you can find great ones.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's fun to see people specializing and working different angles. And also they're dealing with climate change there, and that's causing people to take all different kinds of approaches and revisit how they treat how they work with their vineyards. We've also got, and everybody knows it and loves it, and this is a great time of year, but again, if it's also, any time is a good time of year for prestige champagne as well. Those are usually the top of the line, right? So if you're, It's the couture of the house as opposed to the one you find in the mall. And this is a very, very special selection. It's usually a pretty signature style. I believe Piper makes one called Rare, which they really go crazy on. And in fact, it's so rare that I've only tasted it like once. But it was
and
fantastic.
I tasted it 0.
Oh, dang. Okay. All right. I hope they're watching. We in Napa. We'll give you our coordinates. But it's really fun, and it's an instant statement that takes an occasion and makes it special. It certainly communicates to whoever you're with that you're treating it as a special moment. And there's not many other wines that you can say that about unless the person knows a bunch about wine.
Right.
Because, so for example, Kelli, her first book was called Napa Valley Then and Now. But our most, revered wines, you have to know a lot about wine or be kind of a really wine-focused person, whereas everyone in the world has probably heard of Dom Perignon.
Right.
Whether they drink wine or not. So Prestige Champagne has its own special place, and that's a neat thing. Mm-hmm. But also, all of these classic sparkling wines are definitely worth checking out. I think it's a really fun, so you have 2 homework assignments. One is you're going to taste tank method Prosecco. Mionetto's a great one to go for. And you're going to taste traditional method champagne. But also, you could buy traditional method from other regions. Do you have any other favorites?
Well, you are, first of all, a really mean teacher. This is a lot of homework.
Oh, the homework is fun.
I feel bad for everybody. Do I have any favorite?
Any favorite traditional methods outside of the Champagne region?
Oh, yeah, for
you
sure.
You talked about English.
Yeah, English sparkling wine is also having a moment. Really exciting stuff. Cava, right?
Cava from Spain.
Cava is a love of mine, which is, sort of doing everything that the Champenois do, but with their own grapes often. And then here in Napa Valley, we have a lot of really wonderful traditional method. And traditional method is just sort of code for doing what the Champenois do. And so we in California, we have a really, at this point, incredibly established and entrenched tradition of traditional method sparkling wines, a lot of which are actual outposts of the champagne houses themselves.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
You can find great in Tasmania, forget it, lots of great ones there, even Brazil. I mean, the Cap Classique in South Africa, sparkling wine is all over the world, and it's an incredibly fertile, fun area to explore.
Okay, so it's going to be around the world in 7 or 8 countries. You have now a third tasting group assignment that you need to do. But I think that's a great point. And I had shown you the pictures from Franciacorta in Italy, the Lombardy region. Great one. And the Trentino region makes them as well. There's some wonderful ones. And if you haven't seen episode 1, we did welcome Miles Trapp as the most recent Master Sommelier, and we actually toasted that with the Domaine Carneros Le Rêve, which means the dream, because the dream came true. And I believe he was studying for his advanced right as his first child was being born, and then he passed when she turned a year. So it can be done, family and career. It just takes a lot of cooperation and coordination and willingness to not sleep from time to time. So check that out. Episode 2, as you know, we talked about Thanksgiving. You can catch all of these on recording. I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel and tell your friends about it. I hope you'll let us know what you want to see covered in future episodes, because the world is our oyster, and we will live a lifetime and never cover it all. So that'll be fun. I made bacon to pair with this rosé, but then I forgot to get it out. And
Where's the bacon?
So that's your homework assignment, is to add bacon. Actually, that's our holiday tradition usually Christmas morning. We don't make bacon that often. We love it, but it's one of those things that, in moderation. And so it's funny, because when my kids smell bacon, they go, "It smells like Christmas," because we have bacon and champagne or sparkling wine on Christmas morning typically, which is super fun. So give it a try, particularly with rosé. Spectacular. And you could actually do a bacon tasting. We've done it before, of different bacons, and do your evaluations. But our next episode coming up is going to be January. And, it's summer down under, right? So we are going to hit on the essential Australian wine styles, the ones that are inimitable and distinct to Australia. Really, nobody else making them like they do. So we're going to talk about Rutherglen Stickies. We're going to talk about, of course, the classic Shiraz and Grenache blends.
Cool.
And we're going to talk about Hunter Valley Semillon, because these are wines, many of them, if not really all of the categories, are wines that you can put in your cellar and age, but they're not going to put you back a crazy amount of money.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, so that's a neat thing, because I think a lot of times people think, well, what's the whole point? And these are sort of that midway point of wine that you can age it, but it's not going to cost you forever, and you don't have to age it forever too, because you don't want to wait, 10 years, maybe 8, maybe 10, but 20 or 30 or 50 is a lot.
I served Hunter Valley Semillon at my wedding because I knew it was great. There was going to be a lot of wine people in the room and it would impress everyone, and it wasn't going to cost me a fortune.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. Classy girl, but she
Cheap girl.
like I said, you should do this for a living. So what I want to wrap up with, and I always like to talk about something to do with sustainability. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about Piper Heidsieck, aside from the fact that I love that winery, is that they are a certified B Corporation. And when we talk about sustainability in wine, we talk, everybody knows certified organically grown grapes, right? And they think maybe that's the be all and end all. But B Corporation is something that in any industry can pursue it, but it sees sustainability as a whole ecosystem of how you interact with your community, stakeholder mentality with who you work with, but also who your suppliers are and who your downstream customers are, and planet health for the long term, and so many more things like that. So to me, it's also a big commitment. It's a big transparency commitment and a big effort. But it's a shared one, and it recognizes that you don't have to necessarily treat planet and profit as a zero-sum game, like one or the other. So it's a thoughtful way of doing business, and so I think you should check them out and check out other wineries that are certified B Corp, because it is a really full circle thing. And when we vote with our wallets on what we care about, we help make sure that sustainability works, because you do have to pay the bills and you do have to make a profit, and you can't pay your workers if you don't, right? So all of us together can make that type of thing work, which is super cool. So check them out, and I want to thank them for making that commitment. There are lots of other wineries that do it as well, and many other really, really useful and valuable things, and it's really worth it to be a conscious consumer and support that, because there's so much good wine out there. May as well get good wine made by good people, right? That's kind of how I think about it. So Kelli, thank you so much for the book and all the expertise and the fun. I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has just been really fantastic. I had all these cool pairings, and I didn't give her not a one of them, because I was
I'm so hungry.
I was not organized. Here, have a biscotti. Here you go. Have some Madeira. We're gonna dip Madeira, biscotti, and Madeira, and the whole thing. But we got a lot done in a short space of time. Please, everyone, take great care of yourselves this holiday season. I'm going to let you go just in time for the Rockefeller Center tree lighting. I think it's coming up in about 25 minutes when it actually goes live. I remember the days of working there, and it was crazy fun times serving David Bowie and all these wacky people on the Rockefeller Center skating rink is really cool. But anyway, please have a wonderful, safe holiday season. Chill that champagne, open it carefully. This recording is always going to be available for you to remind yourself of the do's and the don'ts. And we will see you soon with great love and gratitude for your spending your time with us, coming from the Napa Valley. And to all of our good friends, it's a wonderful place to be and a wonderful time of year to be able to spend it together. So cheers to all of you, and we will see you in January on the 8th when it will be Summer Down Under. Cheers.
Cheers.